Oh, lost and by the wind grieved, ghost come back again. Thomas Wolfe, 1900 to 1938. Spirit from the sea. The storm, which had raged all day, was growing worse. Rain pelted the heavy wooden storm shutters, demanding entrance. Like eerie shrieks of a banshee, the relentless wind wailed, a portent of the death and destruction the nor'easter would wreak before the coming of dawn. The proprietress of the Stewart House, an inn on the riverfront in Smithville, dozed fitfully. Mary Elizabeth Stewart had weathered brutal storms many times, but this one held a particular terror. Yesterday, her son, Joseph Bensel, and 4 of his companions, all coastal pilots, had set out to sea in search of a passing ship that might need their skilled guidance through the treacherous waters of Cape Fear. Their pilot boat was an open sea dory with 4 oars and a sail, the type most of the pilots used. Sturdy, but no match for a storm such as this. Since the onset of the storm, she had waited for word of Joseph's return. None came. With a heavy heart, she prayed that his small boat would find shelter somewhere along the coast. But in truth, she imagined it being tossed about like a piece of driftwood in the angry sea. The pilots, in their quest for ships, often had to travel as far north as Cape Lookout, some 90 nautical miles distant. It was 1872, almost a decade after the war between the states. Times were hard, and rivalry for the piloting jobs was fierce. Mary Stewart's son, Joseph, had been able to keep his position at the forefront of the competition due to the skills and daring he had developed during the war. His reputation as the pilot of a successful blockade runner, the city of Petersburg, was widely known. On 16 runs, he had dodged the Yankee gunships, navigating the coastal waters and the Cape Fear River as deftly and stealthily as a crocodile stalking its prey. Oddly, it was the memory of the dangerous days of the war that gave Mary Stewart some small comfort now. She knew that if anyone could ride out a storm in safety, Joseph could. Yet, even though her daughter Kate and the few guests who remained had retired hours before, Mary Stewart could not bring herself to go upstairs to bed. Instead, she lay down on the daybed in the living room. Unable to shake the feeling of foreboding that had been with her all day, she tossed and turned, alert to every change in the storm's assault. The wind stopped abruptly, and in the sudden silence, a well-known sound, the loud click of the gate latch outside, caused Mary Stewart's heart to race in hopeful anticipation. There were footsteps on the porch. She could not see the clock, but she knew that midnight had long since passed. She had checked the time just a short while earlier when she had gotten up to stoke the fire. The flames still danced brightly in the fireplace. The footsteps grew louder, nearing the door, then stopped as someone struggled to open the heavy portal secured tightly against the malevolent wind. It's Joseph, she thought with great relief, for who else would come to her door at this late hour on such a night? Miraculously, he must have brought his boat to a sheltered mooring at the dock next door. He was stopping by her house to calm her fears about his safety before going to his own home on the other side of the village. He always did. The door opened. A man entered the room, wet and dripping in heavy rain gear. Shutting the door behind him, he turned toward the warmth of the fireplace. Mary Stewart was overjoyed to see her son. She sat up and called out to him, thinking that he might not have seen her on the daybed in the near darkness. Joseph? There was no answer. She rose, her joints stiff, unaccustomed to the hardness of the daybed. She walked toward him, happy to see him unhurt, yet puzzled that he had made no reply. She saw the familiar figure clearly outlined in the firelight. Placing his hands on the mantel, Joseph leaned forward and spit into the fire. As the tobacco juice hit the flame, she heard it sizzle. It was a sound she knew well, from a habit long associated with her son. Years later, she would still remember that distinctive sizzle each time she told the story of that night. Joseph, she called again. Again, there was only silence. A low rocking chair stood just in front of the hearth. She watched as her son sat down, his back to her, with his shoulders hunched forward in a posture of extreme weariness. Perhaps he is too exhausted to speak, she thought, a feeling she could well understand. Approaching the chair, she called his name a third time and reached out to place both hands in a gesture of comforting love upon her son's shoulders. Happiness at his return instantly turned to horror. Her outstretched hands hung suspended in space. The rocking chair, now vacant, ceased its motion. The son she had seen, had even heard spit into the fireplace, had vanished. She was alone in the room. Dawn came. The deadly storm was over. Early in the day, a messenger brought the tragic tidings Mary Stuart had been expecting. Joseph Bensel's boat, the Mystery, torn apart by mountainous waves in the midst of the nor'easter's fury, was lost without a trace. There were no survivors. Only one body was ever recovered. Joseph Bensel was not forgotten. In the old cemetery in Southport, formerly Smithville, there's an aged stone obelisk that rises high above the other monuments. It was erected in 1879 as a lasting memorial to the bravery of the 5 pilots lost in the northeastern of 1872, and to 5 more who perished in the hurricane of 1877 aboard the Mary Case Brunt. Carved there, along with the names of the drowned seamen, is this fitting and poignant epitaph. The winds and the sea sing their requiem and shall forevermore. The pilot, Joseph Bensel, was my great-grandfather.